If the Red Sox only do one thing this offseason, I think this has to be it. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin. In today's video, we're going to take a look at the pitcher that I think the Red Sox need to make their top priority this offseason. We're going to break down why he should be that top priority and what it would take for the Red Sox to get him, plus anything that may be standing in their way. But before we get into the video, I just want to give you guys a heads up. We are still raising money for Movember. It has been a little over a week now, and you guys have already raised halfway towards our goal of $1,500. It is absolutely incredible what you've all been able to do. If you want to help us reach our final goal of $1,500, the link to that will be in the comments and the description of this video. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. Now, normally I go through and I introduce the player we're talking about today, but it's so obvious that this is Max Fried, right? If we're talking about a perfect fit with the Boston Red Sox, we've been talking all off season about how Max Fried is that guy, and for some reason we still haven't done a video where we fully break him down on this channel, and I apologize for that because we absolutely need to do that, but I'm rectifying it and we're breaking him fully down today, starting with why he would be a statistical fit for the Boston Red Sox, because the Red Sox are looking for one thing this offseason, and that is improving the front end of this rotation. They have a solid set of players in the back end of this rotation. They need to improve the front end, and Max Fried is absolutely that guy. Last season, he had a 3.25 ERA with a tiny bit higher, 333 FIP, not a ton of traffic on the base pass with a 1.164 WHIP and a 128 ERA plus, about 28% above league average production. And this season is what Fried has done throughout his entire career, because what may be even more impressive than last season is the fact that career-wise, he has just a 307 ERA with, again, a tiny bit higher, 329 FIP, and exactly the same 1.164 WHIP for a career 140 ERA plus, 40% more productive than the average pitcher in the sport. Looking at the career numbers, he's consistently struck out more than the average pitcher in baseball. He's walked less batters than the average pitcher throughout his career. He's given up less home runs. His career opponent OPS is almost 90 points lower than league average. He generates a ton of ground balls. In fact, he generates more ground balls than basically any starter in Major League Baseball, and consistently throughout his career, over half of the baseballs that players make contact with when Max Fried is on the mound has been on the ground. I think that's a really important, sort of underrated part of Max Fried's game. One of the big problems with the Red Sox rotation this year was their home runs. Cutter Crawford led the league in home runs allowed. Nick Pivetta wasn't too far behind him. Brian Bayo had a bit of an issue keeping the ball in the yard, getting not only a frontline guy, but a frontline guy who's going to pound the strike zone and keep the ball on the ground is absolutely important to the next step of this Red Sox rotation. If you take a look at basically any single statistic here, any way you want to slice and dice it, Max Fried statistically makes all the sense in the world for the Boston Red Sox. He's been a model of consistency statistically throughout his career. Not to mention, if we're talking just simply prestige on Max Fried, he's a two-time top 5 Cy Young finisher, a 3-time Gold Glove winner, a 2-time All-Star, and kind of cool, he won a Silver Slugger back in 2021. But it's not just statistics that make Max Fried a pretty perfect fit with this Red Sox team. There are other factors that need to be included as well. The first one being what his potential could be when we're talking about innings. The Red Sox rotation was fairly solid this year. They were a top 7 ERA team in baseball. They had a top 3 WHIP in the sport this year. But one thing they didn't do incredibly well was lengthen games and allow the bullpen to really sort of hammer home the last couple of innings. That's something Max Fried has done very well throughout his career. In fact, if you take a look at the last 6 seasons, including the COVID season, which throws things off a little bit, of those 6 seasons, 4 of them he has pitched over 160 innings. Now, this isn't to say Max Fried isn't without his injury history. Specifically, recently, he has dealt with some forearm issues, but even with the forearm issues over the last couple of years, he was able to throw almost 180 innings this season, and more importantly, he threw 6 innings on average in starts this season. That's, again, a really big boost to this Red Sox rotation. Now, if we take a look at those 6 seasons again and we take out the COVID year, you're talking about 4 of the last 5 years for Max Fried where he has gone over 160 innings. Yes, he has an injury history, but he's also been able to continuously be not only a productive pitcher, but a consistent pitcher as well. Getting that into this rotation could be absolutely massive for the Boston Red Sox. Over those last 6 years, he also averaged about 5 2/3 innings. So you're talking about a third less innings than he did last season. That's again still 2 more outs than you are getting on average from the overall rotation from the Red Sox this year, which was sitting at just about 5 innings. That doesn't sound like a lot, but you add 2/3 of an inning to 30 starts throughout this season, and you're talking about a guy who's going to not only help the Red Sox rotation, but also help their bullpen as well. It allows them to utilize less players per game than they were putting out last season, and that was a big reason why you saw issues with the Red Sox bullpen this year. You saw them sort of break down because they were used so much. Allowing for that bullpen to be used less and in more high leverage spots absolutely will help it get back on the right track. So statistically, he fits. Innings-wise, he fits. Then you take a look at just simply the arm. He's a left-handed starting pitcher, and while you could get away, and the Red Sox absolutely did get away with having a full right-handed starting rotation last year, it certainly isn't going to hurt. Getting versatility into that rotation, shout out versatility, is going to be absolutely fantastic. It gives you different looks at the top of this rotation. All of a sudden, your top 2 guys are a funky lefty and a funky righty, and that's going to be difficult for opposing players as a 1-2 punch. It's going to absolutely have some sort of impact on the Boston Red Sox. Now, on top of all of this, he's also 30 years old going into his age 31 season, which isn't super young considering he would most likely sign a longer-ish term deal, but it's also not super old either. Max Fried has at least 2 or 3, maybe even 4 more very productive seasons in his belt until he starts to decline a little bit. So even if you sign him to a long-term deal, more than likely a majority of his career over your, 5-6 years is going to be more productive than it isn't. And that to me is a really great sign. So to answer the question of why the Red Sox need to make Max Fried their number 1 priority, I think it's as obvious could possibly be. You're talking about a guy who could be a number 1 caliber left-handed starter that consistently throughout his career has kept the ball on the ground and more importantly in the yard. He pounds the strike zone and has the potential to give you a ton of innings. I don't know what in there would scare away Red Sox fans from not wanting this guy on your team. But then the bigger question becomes, what is this going to cost and how are the Red Sox going to be able to achieve it? Because I think that's a really interesting conversation. When it comes to cost, Max Fried obviously won't be cheap. He's one of the top 3, if not top 2 arms available on the market, and there are a couple of different projections for what he could possibly get. The first one is from Spotrac that is predicting 6 years, $49-ish million, or about $24 million a season. Now that would sign him through his age 36 season. MLB Trade Rumors is also somewhere in the same ballpark, predicting a 6-year, $156 million contract, which is about $26 million a year. Let's split the difference and say the Red Sox could possibly sign him for a 6-year, $135 million deal. Now, there are a couple of things that immediately scare me about that possibility. The first one is the year factor. The Red Sox historically have not been very inclined to give pitchers a whole lot of years on their contracts, especially ones that would sign them through basically their upper 30s years. The last person to get 5 years would be Chris Sale back in 2019, and that was a contract extension. Bayo also got a 6-year deal, but I think that's a little bit in a different category. In fact, the last time the Red Sox did this with a starting pitcher on the open market was David Price back in 2015. It's been basically 10 years since the Red Sox have given out a length of deal like this, and that scares me a little bit. Are the Red Sox going to be comfortable giving out the years necessary to actually get this done? Now, maybe it takes 4 years, maybe it takes 5 years, and if that's the case, I think this becomes becomes a much more realistic scenario. 6 years scares me a little bit with this Red Sox team. The other thing is obviously the money aspect of it, right? Historically, over the last couple of seasons, the Red Sox haven't been super inclined to give out a ton of AAV to a ton of different players. Now, there have been exceptions to that rule. Trevor Story was an exception. Masataka Yoshida was an exception. Rafael Devers' extension was an exception to that rule. But the overall rule of thumb for this Red Sox team is that they wanted short-term, medium AAV contracts that could help the back end of whatever part of this team that they are looking to improve upon. That is going to have to change if the Red Sox want to get Max Fried in a Red Sox uniform. They simply can't figure out a way to cheap out on this one. They are going to have to pony it up, and I think that's going to be extremely important because the other part of this is that it's going to be a bit of an uphill battle for the Red Sox to get this deal done. While Max Fried himself hasn't specifically said which way he's going to go in free agency, he hasn't said out loud at least, hey, I'm going to end up on the West Coast like some other players have, like Juan Soto, who said his preference is to be on the East Coast. Everyone and their mother right now is predicting Max Fried to either go to the Dodgers or to the Cubs. They also have names like the Orioles and the Blue Jays in on Max Fried. John Heyman released a report yesterday that not only said the Red Sox were in on him, but the Orioles and Blue Jays were as well. That's a lot of competition for Max Fried's services, and the Red Sox aren't exactly the most appealing team in the league right now, if we're being totally honest with ourselves, right? It was very public last year that they did not sign Teoscar Hernandez because they were too cheap. They needed to get payroll off of their current roster in order to sign him, right? That's the sort of conversations they've been having with agents and players over these last couple of years, and that cannot bode well in free agency. Yes, they have Lucas Giolito, but I think ultimately what this is going to have to come down to the Red Sox is they're going to have to overpay for him. They're flat out going to have to show more money than anyone else or more years or whatever. They're going to have to blow him away. And to be honest with you, that makes me a little bit nervous, right? It makes me a little bit nervous that the Red Sox are going to have to do something they might not be comfortable doing in order to get this done. But in my opinion, it's absolutely worth the overpay. I personally don't care about John Henry's money. I don't think any of you guys really care about John Henry's money. I think if the Red Sox were going to overpay for anybody, this is the guy to do that. This is the guy that could end up fronting the next legitimately competitive Red Sox team. He brings experience, he brings statistical consistency, he brings innings, right? We're talking about a guy who fits every single one of the Red Sox biggest needs, and he's a veteran. He's a guy who can talk to Tanner Houck about what it means to start in a postseason, Brian Bayo about what it means to be consistent throughout an entire year. This isn't someone who's brand new to Major League Baseball. I just think every single factor that the Red Sox are looking for when it comes to frontline starting pitching, Max Fried checks off that box. This has to be the dude that you make your number one priority. This has to be the guy that if you're going to overpay for anybody, if you're going to throw caution to the wind, if you're going to make a balls to the wall type move, this is the dude to do it with. This is simply the Red Sox number one priority. It has to be. I'm looking at you, John Henry, right now. Put the money on the damn table and get this deal done, because it just makes absolutely no sense to let this guy, especially go to the Orioles or the Blue Jays. I mean, what are we doing if that happens? I mean, look, you lose out to him to the Dodgers. I mean, a lot of teams are going to lose out to players to the Dodgers, but if you can't pony up the money that the Orioles or the Blue Jays are putting on the table, we got a really big problem. But I have to put Max Fried as the number one priority. He just makes too much sense with this Red Sox team, but that's just my opinion. So let me know in the comment section down below. One, is Max Fried your number one priority for the Red Sox this offseason? If you were the GM, would he be at the top of your list? If not, let me know why in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. It just simply helps the videos out a ton, and it's the best way to let me know you're enjoying the content. Don't forget, if you want to listen instead of watch these episodes, you can always head over to your favorite podcasting app and look up Red Seat Radio. As always, Movember, make sure you guys are donating. It's in the comments or the description. Help us get to $1,500 raised this month. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the Red Seats.